Hey, this is Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, 3rd edition out now, and you're listening to your Morning Coffee podcast with my friends Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart, weekly music news for the new music business.
From Chris Castle for his Music Tech Policy blog, the sinister question Spotify has not answered about its AI. What did they train on?
From the staff at Polestar, an open letter, Irving Azoff gives kudos to Billboard charts for standing up to YouTube.
And from Lindsay Havens at Billboard, Noah Kahan wanted buying tickets to be fair for fans. Here's how he made it happen. All of this, the latest Live Nation Ticketmaster news, and a whole bunch more. We're glad you're here. We're going to start the show right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand! Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air, on the air, on the air, on the air, on the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Good to see you, friend. How are you, man?
Beautiful day here in Southern California. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. We're hanging in there. We're doing a little bit later today, so I'm feeling a little bit more awake because you're a morning guy and I am not a morning guy.
I know, and look, I'm a little bit country. You're a little bit rock and roll. It's totally cool. We have a special episode coming this week that I'm really excited about. It's our AI Roundtable number 3. And we have some great panelists. We have Kristen Robinson from Billboard. We have Vicki Nauman from Cross Border Works. Bobby Osinski, Music 3.0, and for the first time, our friend Danny Deal from Caldecott Music Group. You probably remember Caldecott. That's sort of the parent company for a lot of things, including BandLab. Really excited about that.
And I can hardly wait. And we both enjoy doing this so much, and it's such a wonderful learning experience for us and for everyone that participates. It is really a blast, and things are changing so quickly. I mean, we could do this every month, actually, and just update things.
Absolutely, and we talk about AI a lot on this podcast, and AI is in the newsletter a lot, but it's moving really quickly. And speaking of moving quickly, this week I'm going to be sending out our first survey for our readers and listeners. We want to get to know, what they're all about, hear what's important. So I'm really excited to sort of learn more about the people who listen to the podcast and read the newsletters. So if you get that survey in your email, please take a minute and tell us how you feel. We're really excited about that too.
For sure. Hey, our good friends over at Symphonic have just released the ultimate guide for a kick-ass year in 2026. From mastering distribution and advertising to understanding management tools, release strategies, marketing best practices, and more, this guide breaks down everything you need to know and to succeed with in 2026.
Yeah, that's right. They do this every year, and it's really, one of those sort of go-to things that you want to print out and keep on your desk and dog-ear it and mark it up. So with this guide, you're going to learn how to build a real 2026 release strategy and marketing plan that actually works. You can optimize your catalog for discovery, streaming, and AI-driven opportunities. Master metadata, which is so crucial today to make sure every penny finds its way to you. Leveraging UGC, user-generated content, short-form video, that strategy to grow your fan base, and finally collect every royalty that you're owed and protect your creative work. And that's just the beginning. The best part is this guide is completely free. See the link in your morning coffee or visit blog.symphonic.com.
Wonderful, wonderful resource.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, this piece, very interesting story. It's from Ernesto van der Sar over at Torrent Freak. Anna's Archive quietly releases millions of Spotify tracks despite legal pushback. So despite being sued by Spotify and several record labels, Anna's Archive has silently begun releasing the actual music files from its massive Spotify scrape. The Shadow Library's back-end torrent index now lists dozens of new torrents containing approximately 2.8 million tracks, totaling roughly 6 terabytes of audio data. This marks a significant escalation in the already historic standoff with the music industry.
Right. Anna's Archive is generally known as a meta search engine for shadow libraries, helping users find, pirated books and other related resources. However, this last December, the site announced that it had also backed up Spotify, which came as a shock to the music industry. Crazy stuff.
Shock to say the least.
Yeah.
Wow. Another piece from James Hanley over at Music Business Worldwide. Music distributor Alliance Entertainment says it sold over 16 million vinyl records and 13 million CDs in 2025 on a unit volume basis. Alliance said it sold, again, 16.3 million vinyl records over the 12 months that ended on December 31st. That's a 5% increase year over year, while CEO Jeff Walker confirmed on an earnings call the company sold over 13 million CDs in 2025.
Yeah, vinyl sales, at least in the U.S., they grew almost 9% year over year to about 48 million. And that's according to Luminate, with more than 4 in 10 vinyl records sold at indie record stores. Meanwhile, 1 in 3 CDs were purchased through e-commerce sites. Interesting.
Very interesting. Another piece from our friend Mandy DeLugdug over at Music Business Worldwide. Apple Music in the news in this point. TikTok tests letting users stream full songs through Apple Music without leaving the app. So Apple Music and TikTok have teamed up to test 2 new features to better connect music between the two platforms.
How is this only happening now? That's according to an Apple-focused news website that we love called 9to5Mac this last week. The companies are beta testing a feature called Play Full Song, which would allow TikTok users to stream full songs through Apple Music without having to leave the app. The integration is based on Apple Music's Music Kit framework, which lets third-party developers integrate Apple Music into their own apps.
Indeed. Another piece from Mandy DeLugdug, Music Business Worldwide, more on Apple. Apple Music's iOS 26.4 beta introduces AI-powered playlist tool. So Apple Music is close to launching an artificial intelligence-powered playlist generator that would let users create playlists through text prompts, joining streaming rivals that have rolled out similar tools in recent months.
Yeah, this is super cool, and I think this is going to be everywhere at some point. The feature, it's called Playlist Playground, and it appeared in beta versions of iOS 26.4, released to developers last week. According to Apple-focused news website Mac Rumors and Macworld, users can type prompts describing moods, artists, musical styles, and the tech creates a 25-song playlist with a custom title. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. Hey, we got to thank our sponsors. We are so lucky to have a wonderful group of folks to help us put the show on every week, including our good friends over at Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are changing how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. It is founded by Bruce Houghton. Hypebot is edited by touring artist and publisher Jeremy Young and supported by live music discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town.
Yes, sir. Bands in town, now serving over 100 million live music fans. They trust bands in town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It's the #1 artist services platform, and it connects over 700,000 artists with their super fans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates across all platforms.
Yep. And in case you're wondering, I get to hang out every week, yes indeed, with my good friend Jay Gilbert, music business consultant, educator, curator of the weekly Your Morning Coffee newsletter, and a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, and Warner Music Groups. And all this talk about Apple also reminded me, when we first started together when I first met you at Universal, I should say, there was a small group of us that were Mac geeks, and you were one of them. Absolutely.
I remember that. Seems like 100 years ago now, but it really wasn't that long ago. I get to do the show every week with my good friend Mike Etchart, and we typically get on and talk for an hour or more just about what's going on in the news, or some book that we've read or a documentary that we've seen. And if you don't know by now, Mike is longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, Warner Music, Capital EMI, and Universal Music Group.
All right. Well, what do you say we jump into the main stories?
Yeah, lots of great stuff this week. Our first story is by our friend Chris Castle. And if you don't know, he's a music industry attorney and artist advocate. He has this really cool blog called Music Technology Policy that we pull stories from all the time. And whenever I don't understand any of this stuff, he's one of the first phone calls I make. So the headline of the blog this week: the sinister question Spotify has not answered about its AI. What did they train on? In case you missed it, Spotify has apparently been training its own music AI that should allow them to capture some of the AI hype on Wall Street, but it brings back some bad memories.
Yeah, there was a time when the music business had a simple rule: we will never let another MTV build a business on our backs. That philosophy arose from watching the arbitrage as value created by artists was extracted by platforms that had nothing to do with creating it. That spectacle shaped the industry's deep reluctance to license digital music in the early years of the internet. Never was supposed to mean never. Chris says, I took them at their word.
Yeah, but of course, never turned out to be conditional. The industry made exception after exception until the rule dissolved entirely. First came the absurd statutory shortcut of the DMCA safe harbor era. Remember that? Then YouTube, then iTunes, then Spotify, then Twitter, then Facebook, social media, then TikTok. Each time, platforms were allowed to scale first and renegotiate later, and Twitter still hasn't paid.
Well, Chris says each time the price of admission for the platform was astonishingly low compared to the value extracted from music and musicians. Astonishingly low compared to their current market value in businesses that are totally dependent on creatives. He says you could probably have put Amazon in that category.
Yeah, Chris writes, some of those deals came wrapped in what looked like, at the time, meaningful compensation, headline-grabbing advances that were described as equity participation. In reality, those advances were finite, and the equity was often a thin sliver, while the long-term effect was to commoditize artist royalties and shift durable value during the platforms.
He says that is one reason why so many artists came to resent and in many cases openly despise Spotify and the big pool model, all the while being told how transformative Spotify's algorithm is without explaining how the wonderful algorithm misses 80% of the music on the platform.
And now we arrive at the latest collapse of quote-unquote never. Spotify's announcement that it is developing its own music AI and derivative generation tools. If you dislike Spotify before, you may loathe what comes next.
Well, Chris says this moment is different, but in many ways it is the same fundamental problem MTV created. Artists and labels provided the core asset, their recordings, for free or nearly free, and the platform built a powerful business by packaging that value and selling it back to them. Distribution monetized access to music. AI monetizes the music itself.
Yeah, he goes on to write that according to Music Business Worldwide, Spotify's framing appears to offer something of a middle ground. Their new CEO, Gustav Soderstrom, is not arguing for open distribution of AI derivatives across the internet. Instead, he's positioning Spotify as the platform where this interaction should happen, where the fans, the royalty pool, and the technology already exist.
Chris says, right, our fans in his pathetic royalty pool. And this is supposed to make us like you? Chris talks about the training gap, which brings us to the question he says Spotify has not answered, the question that matters more than any feature announcement or product demo.
Yeah, that question is, what did they train on? Was it epidemic sound? Was it licensed catalog? Was it public domain recordings, user uploads, pirated material? All are equally possible.
Yeah, he says, but far more likely to me, did Spotify train on the recordings licensed for streaming and Spotify's own platform user data derived from the fans we drove to their service? Quietly accumulated, normalized, and ingested into AI over years? Spotify has not said, he said, and that silence matters.
Right. Chris writes about the transparency gap. Creators currently have no meaningful visibility into whether their work has already been absorbed into Spotify's generative systems. No disclosure, no audit trail, no licensing registry, no opt-in structure, no compensation framework. The unknowns are not theoretical, they're structural.
Chris writes about the question that will not go away. He says Spotify may continue to speak about AI derivatives in the language of opportunity, scale, and creative democratization, but none of that resolves the underlying issue. What did they train on?
Yeah, great piece by Chris Castle. The piece first appeared in Music Tech Solutions, and we highly recommend that you read the full article by Chris Castle. There's a link in your morning coffee. Our next story is from Lindsay Havens from Billboard, and the headline was Noah Kahan wanted buying tickets to be fair for fans. Here's how he made it happen.
Yeah, so for the Great Divide outing, Kahan made use of 2 Ticketmaster programs that aim to improve the fan experience when it comes to purchasing concert tickets. One of these is identity verification, known as Persona, in which Ticketmaster uses multiple forms of identification to help block potential scammers. Kahan used Persona verification during pre-sale sign-up to help protect fans, making him the first artist to actually do so.
Right. Additionally, Kahan is using Ticketmaster's face value exchange program, which caps resale prices at the original price paid with no added fees. Since becoming available in 2019, artists like Hayley Williams, Billie Eilish, and even the Foo Fighters have used this program.
Manager Drew Simmons says that beyond fighting bots and brokers, the team prioritized keeping ticket prices reasonable, with floor seats starting at $150, including fees. The team also ran a lottery for the general admission pit, offering up a portion of those tickets for $100, including fees.
Kahan's sold-out stadium run, which includes an unprecedented 4 nights at Fenway Park, sold over 1 million tickets. The 30-date tour begins June 11th in Orlando, Florida, and wraps up August 31st in Seattle, Washington.
Yeah, and while we're talking about tickets, there's some Live Nation Ticketmaster news. This is from Tim Ingham over at Music Business Worldwide. Live Nation says Ticketmaster breakup threat is already over. Calls for DOJ settlement. They say it's time to move on. So Live Nation's Dan Wall's statement comes one day after a U.S. district judge issued a ruling that narrowed the scope of the Department of Justice's case.
Yeah, it did. The judge dismissed claims that Live Nation monopolized the concert promotion market while allowing claims related to Ticketmaster's dominance in venue-facing ticketing and Live Nation's practice of tying access to its amphitheaters to its promotion services to proceed at trial.
And another piece by Mandy DeLugdug in Music Business Worldwide. U.S. State Attorneys General ready to take Live Nation to trial with or without the Department of Justice. So several state attorneys general say they are prepared to pursue an antitrust trial against Live Nation, even if the U.S. Department of Justice reaches a settlement with the company.
Right. That's according to Bloomberg News, which cited the interview with California Attorney General Rob Bonta and Connecticut Attorney General William Tong. Bonta told the news outlet, quote, "I think we have to explore settlement in good faith. And if it meets our very high standards of what is necessary, we need to pursue it," end quote.
Yeah, well, and again, on the same topic, this is from Tim Ingham at Music Business Worldwide. Live Nation annual revenues topped $25 billion in 2025. That's up $2 billion year over year with adjusted operating profit of $2.4 billion. So Live Nation Entertainment has posted annual revenues of $25.2 billion for 2025. That's up 9%, or up by $2.05 billion year over year.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note that Live Nation also reported that a record 159 million people attended Live Nation promoted shows in 2025, and that's across 55,000 concerts, and that's up by 8 million year over year. A standout fact, though, about these 159 million attendees, for the first time in 2025, more music fans attended Live Nation concerts outside the U.S. than inside it. And our final story this week, this was super interesting. It's an open letter. Irving Azoff gives kudos to Billboard charts for standing up to YouTube. And this was in an article from Polestar magazine, the Polestar staff.
Yeah, so this is the open letter regarding Billboard and YouTube. So it starts by saying, when you least expect it, expect it. Irving says, that's what I love about our business. Someone always surprises you. I have been waiting to see who's willing to stand up to the bully that is YouTube, and kudos to Billboard for doing just that.
Right. Irving goes on to write that a few months ago, I wrote a Billboard guest column detailing how YouTube is using its market power to coerce everyone for its own financial gain. When faced with the strength and tyrannical tactics of YouTube, many companies can't fight back. Imagine my surprise and delight when Billboard actually took a stand against YouTube and didn't give in to their unreasonable demands.
Right. He goes on to say, last December, YouTube threw a tantrum and threatened that if Billboard did not count free and paid streams equally for chart purposes, YouTube would pull all its data from the Billboard charts. He says, guess what? Billboard refused to give in and did not let YouTube dictate the rules and control the Billboard charts.
Right. Irving goes on to say, I applaud Billboard for being willing to stand up. YouTube pays music creators, artists and songwriters, less than any other comparable digital service and shouldn't have influence over the Billboard charts. When YouTube starts paying artists and songwriters on par with the other music services, well, then its streams can be counted the same as Apple, Spotify, etc. Until then, we should all be happy to let YouTube take its toys and go home.
He says since 2018, Billboard has correctly counted paid streams more heavily than free streams when determining chart position. He says it makes sense because Billboard's charts are supposed to be a measure of commercial success. Despite this, it appears that Billboard has agreed to place more weight on YouTube's free streams to try to convince them to stay. That makes no sense to me, he says, but my guess is that Billboard was most likely trying to appease Google Goliath.
Google Goliath. Apparently, that concession wasn't enough to satisfy YouTube, Irving writes. YouTube continued to demand that Billboard make no distinction between free and paid streams on the charts. This our way or the highway behavior is what we've seen from YouTube time and time again. What does YouTube care about the Billboard charts? It seems like this is another attempt by YouTube to increase its leverage over artists, songwriters, and rights holders.
He adds, if YouTube controls the charts, my guess is they think it will make them even more powerful. And then, guess what? In the next round of negotiations with labels and publishers, YouTube will continue to use its power to try to lower rates they pay again. YouTube already pays less than the other streaming platforms, and it could get even worse for all of us.
Yeah, Irving goes on to write that we should all support Billboard in standing up for artists and songwriters by not giving in to YouTube's clear attempt to control the charts. And when YouTube pulls these shenanigans again, the industry needs to stand up and not allow YouTube to deepen its power over artists.
He says if YouTube chooses not to participate in Billboard's charts unless it sets the rules in its favor, That's fine by me. Until YouTube starts paying artists and songwriters more, I say good riddance. We're all better off without them. Well, there
Wow.
you have it.
Thank you, Irving Azoff. Obviously an icon, a legend in this business, and I really appreciate his open letter. That was
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we want to thank our sponsors before we wrap up the show. Big thanks to our good friends over at Hypebot and Bands in Town. By the way, to advertise in the podcast and the newsletter, you can go over to yourmorning.coffee for more information. Music is by the Licorice Quartet, and if you enjoyed the show, please tell one friend. Jay and I would certainly appreciate that. So, on behalf of that guy, my good friend Jay Gilbert, thanks for listening. I'm Mike Etchart. We'll be back next week on the Your Morning Coffee Podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.